Muscular CEO freezes when he sees his childhood love washing the car of his company. Then, something was wrong. This wasn't coincidence. People don't just randomly end up cleaning cars in the parking garage of their childhood love corporate headquarters. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to see someone who knew all your secrets pretend you're a stranger? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Have you ever seen the love of your life scrubbing bird poop off your Bentley and pretending she doesn't know you exist? Gavin Reese stepped out of his corner office elevator into the Miami heat, designer shoes clicking against polished concrete. The parking garage of Reese Corporate Tower hummed with the distant sound of pressure washers and squeaking rubber. Just another Tuesday morning in his empire. Then he saw her, bent over the hood of his silver Bentley, spray bottle in one hand, microfiber cloth in the other. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Uniform crisp despite the sweat beading on her forehead. She moved with purpose, methodical, professional. But it was the way she held her left shoulder, slightly raised, protecting an old injury, that made his world tilt sideways. Alicia, have you ever felt your heart stop and race at the same time? That moment when your past crashes into your present so hard you forget how to breathe? Tell me in the comments if you've ever had that shock of recognition that changes everything. 18 years. 18 years since that summer in Macon, Georgia. Since her laugh echoed through his bedroom window. Since she disappeared from his life like smoke. Now she was here, in his building, cleaning his car. Gavin's throat went dry. The confident CEO who commanded boardrooms full of sharks suddenly felt like a 17-year-old boy again, watching the girl he loved through his childhood bedroom window. She straightened up, stretching her back, and for one electric second their eyes met across the concrete expanse. No recognition flickered in her gaze. No surprise. No anger. Nothing. She looked right through him like he was air. The spray bottle never paused in her grip. She turned back to the car, attacking a stubborn water spot with focused intensity. Professional, detached, cold, but Gavin caught something that made his blood freeze. As she reached for a higher section of the windshield, her sleeve rode up, revealing a thin white scar across her wrist. Faded now, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. He knew that scar. He'd kissed it once, on a July night when they were kids, after she'd cut herself climbing through his window. He'd bandaged it with torn strips from his favorite t-shirt while she tried not to cry. Do you know someone who has experienced a moment that defined their entire childhood? Someone who disappeared from your life without explanation? Share your story below. I want to hear about the people who shaped you. Mr. Reese. His assistant's voice cut through the memory fog. Your 9 o'clock is waiting. Gavin couldn't move, couldn't look away. Alicia had moved to the rear bumper now, her movements efficient and practiced, like she'd been doing this work for years. Like the girl who used to debate law cases with him over stolen cookies from his mother's kitchen had never existed. What happened to law school? What happened to all those dreams she used to whisper to him in the dark? She finished with his car and moved to the next one, a red Tesla belonging to his VP of operations. Same methodical process, same professional distance. Same complete and total ignorance of the fact that her childhood best friend, her first kiss, her first everything, was standing 20 feet away having an emotional breakdown. Gavin forced his feet to move, walked past her toward the exit, close enough to smell the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with cleaning solution, close enough to hear her humming softly under her breath, the same melody she used to hum while they did homework together. She didn't look up, but as he reached his car door, he heard her voice for the first time in 18 years. Quiet, professional, directed at another member of the cleaning crew. Make sure you get the chrome on the rims. Mr. Reese likes everything perfect. She knew exactly who he was. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to see someone who knew all your secrets pretend you're a stranger? To have the most important person from your past treat you like you never mattered at all? Drop a heart in the comments if you felt that kind of invisible pain. The car door slammed behind him with more force than necessary. In the rearview mirror, He watched Alicia methodically work her way down the line of vehicles, each movement precise and distant. Something was wrong. This wasn't coincidence. People don't just randomly end up cleaning cars in the parking garage of their childhood love's corporate headquarters. She was here for a reason, and judging by the way she looked right through him, it wasn't going to be a happy reunion. The richest man in Miami spent his morning Googling a janitor, and what he found made him question everything he thought he knew about the girl who used to steal his hoodies. Gavin's fingers hovered over his laptop keyboard, the boardroom around him buzzing with quarterly reports and profit margins. But all he could see was Alicia's face from the parking garage. All he could hear was that professional voice saying his name like he was just another client. Alicia Martinez. He typed in the search bar. Nothing recent. A few college newspaper mentions from Georgia State. Debate team, Dean's List, pre-law society president. All dated 7 years ago. Then silence. Like she'd vanished from the digital world entirely. He tried Alicia Santos, her mother's name. Still nothing that matched the woman downstairs with the familiar scar in the distant eyes. Boss, Marcus, his head of security, knocked on the conference room door. You want background checks on the new cleaning crew? Gavin's pulse jumped. Yeah, bring me everything. 20 minutes later, Marcus dropped a thin folder on the polished table. Most of them are local, standard employment history. But this one, he flipped to a specific page. Alicia Martinez. Hired last week through Atlas Corp Facility Services out of Atlanta. References check out, but something feels off. There she was. Professional headshot attached to her employment application. Same dark eyes that used to challenge him to midnight debates about everything from Supreme Court cases to whether aliens existed. Same stubborn chin that lifted when she was about to argue with him about something completely ridiculous. But this version of Alicia looked tired, guarded, like life had knocked her down more times than she'd admit. Have you ever looked at someone from your past and wondered what battles they fought while you weren't there to help? What storms they weathered alone? Tell me in the comments about someone you wish you could have protected. What feels off? Gavin asked, still staring at her photo. She's overqualified. College education, clean record, stellar references. Most people with her background don't take custodial work unless. Marcus paused. Unless what? Unless they're running from something. Or towards something. The words hit Gavin like ice water. Alicia wasn't here by accident. She'd taken this job knowing exactly whose building she'd be cleaning. Knowing exactly whose car she'd be washing every morning. But why? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee? Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Corner of Biscayne and 3rd. Come alone. Ugh. Gavin stared at the message until the words blurred. She had his personal number. Had always had his personal number, apparently, despite 18 years of silence. Do you believe in second chances? In the possibility that someone who walked out of your life might walk back in for all the right reasons? Or do you think people only return when they want something? Share your thoughts below. That night, Gavin couldn't sleep. He stood at his penthouse window overlooking Biscayne Bay, remembering another sleepless night 18 years ago when everything changed. The night before Alicia disappeared. They'd been lying on his childhood bedroom floor, planning their future. She was going to law school. He was going to business school. They'd meet back in Atlanta after graduation and change the world together. Save up money for a little house with a garden where she could grow those tomatoes she was always talking about. Promise me something, she'd whispered in the dark. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how successful you get or how far apart we end up, you'll remember this version of us. Before everything gets complicated, he promised, kissed her forehead, held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, she was gone. Her mother's house stood empty, windows dark, grass already growing wild in the yard. No forwarding address, no explanation, no goodbye. Now she was back, texting him like no time had passed. Like 18 years of silence was just a brief pause in their conversation. His reflection stared back from the window glass. Older, harder, successful beyond anything that 17-year-old boy could have imagined. But underneath the expensive suit and the confidence money bought, he was still that kid who woke up to find his best friend had vanished without a trace. 7 a.m. couldn't come fast enough. She was already waiting when he arrived, hands wrapped around a paper cup like it was the only warm thing in her world. And when she looked up, Gavin realized he'd been holding his breath for 18 years. The coffee shop on Biscayne buzzed with morning energy, but Gavin only saw her. Alicia sat in the corner booth, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room like she expected trouble. She traded the cleaning uniform for jeans and a simple white t-shirt, but she still looked like she was ready to run. "You came," she said when he slid into the seat across from her. Her voice carried traces of that Georgia accent he used to tease her about. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She shrugged, a gesture he remembered from childhood arguments. People change. Priorities change. The waitress appeared, coffee pot in hand. Gavin ordered black coffee, same as he'd always drunk it. Alicia raised an eyebrow. Apparently some things about him hadn't changed either. Have you ever sat across from someone who used to know everything about you and felt like you were meeting a complete stranger? That moment when familiar eyes hold secrets you weren't invited to share? Comment below if you've experienced that kind of beautiful, painful distance. "You look good," she said, stirring sugar into her cup. "Success suits you. You look..." He paused, searching for the right words. Tired, guarded, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Different. 18 years will do that. The silence stretched between them, filled with questions neither seemed ready to ask. Gavin studied her face, cataloging the changes. Tiny lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter he hadn't been there to witness. A small scar on her chin he didn't recognize. The same full lips that used to argue with him about everything from movie plots to world politics. "Why are you here, Alicia?" She met his gaze directly for the first time since the parking garage. "I needed a job. You needed someone to clean your cars." Simple business transaction. Nothing about us was ever simple. Something flickered in her expression. Pain, maybe, or regret. "There is no us, Gavin. There hasn't been for a very long time." The words hit harder than they should have. He'd built an empire, commanded respect from some of the most powerful people in the country. But this woman could still cut him down with a single sentence. "Do you think some connections transcend time? That certain people leave marks on your soul that never really fade? Or do you believe the past should stay buried? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Then why text me? Why ask me here?" Alicia's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Because I wanted to see if you remembered." "Remembered what?" "The night before I left. What you promised me." Gavin's throat went dry. He remembered. Every word, every touch, every whispered plan they'd made in the dark. "I remember everything," he said quietly. "Good." She stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the table. "Because I'm about to test exactly how much that promise meant to you." She was halfway to the door before he found his voice. "Alicia, wait." She turned back, and for one moment, she looked exactly like the girl who used to climb through his bedroom window. Young and vulnerable and heartbreakingly hopeful. Some secrets don't stay buried forever, Gavin. Even when powerful families think they can make people disappear. The coffee shop door closed behind her with a soft chime, leaving Gavin alone with his racing thoughts and the growing certainty that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Have you ever discovered that the people you trusted most had been lying to you your entire life? That the foundation of everything you believed about yourself was built on someone else's destruction? Gavin sat in his father's study that evening, surrounded by mahogany and old money, while Richard Reese poured expensive whiskey into crystal glasses. The same room where he'd done homework as a kid while his father conducted business calls. The same desk where he'd signed his first major real estate deal. Everything looked exactly the same, but something fundamental had shifted. "You remember the Martinez family," Gavin said. It wasn't a question. His father's hand paused over the whiskey bottle for just a fraction of a second. Too brief for most people to notice. But Gavin had spent years learning to read subtle tells in boardroom negotiations. Vaguely. "What?" "Their daughter is working in my building. Cleaning cars." Richard's laugh held no warmth. "Well, I suppose some people find their proper level eventually. The casual cruelty in those words made Gavin's stomach turn. This was the man who taught him about integrity, about treating people with respect regardless of their station in life. The same man who'd always claimed character mattered more than cash. What happened to them, Dad? Really happened? Son, that was almost 20 years ago. Why are you digging up ancient history? But Gavin had learned patience from the best. He waited, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. A trick his father had taught him. Actually, Richard sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. The Martinez situation was complicated. Complicated how? Have you ever watched someone you respected reveal themselves to be exactly the opposite of who you thought they were? That moment when a mask slips and you realize you never really knew them at all? Share your experience in the comments below. Karma Martinez was a good woman, hard worker, but she got involved with some people she shouldn't have. What people? Activists, community organizers, people stirring up trouble about our Riverside development project. Gavin's blood went cold. The Riverside project had been his father's biggest deal in the early 2000s. Hundreds of acres of prime real estate transformed from a struggling neighborhood into luxury condos and shopping centers. The project that had launched Reese development into the major leagues. What kind of trouble? Richard's voice took on that patronizing tone Gavin remembered from childhood lectures. Son, sometimes progress requires difficult decisions. The greater good doesn't always align with individual desires. You destroyed their neighborhood. We revitalized a blighted area, created jobs, increased property values. You displaced families who'd lived there for generations. We offered fair market value for every property. And the families who wouldn't sell? The silence stretched long enough for Gavin to hear his own heartbeat. When his father finally spoke, his voice was flat, matter of fact. There were ways to encourage cooperation. The whiskey glass slipped from Gavin's hand, amber liquid spreading across imported Persian carpet. You forced them out. We used legal means to acquire properties necessary for community development. Legal, technical, bloodless language that stripped away the human cost of corporate ambition. Do you think people can change? That someone who built their success on other people's pain can ever truly make amends? Or are some actions too devastating to forgive? Tell me what you think in the comments. Alicia's family lost everything. The Martinez family made choices. They chose to align themselves with people who oppose progress. Actions have consequences. Gavin stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. The study that had always felt like a sanctuary now felt like a tomb. Every expensive piece of furniture, every award on the wall, every symbol of their family's success suddenly looked different, built on foundations he'd never bothered to examine. Some truths are too heavy to carry alone. So at midnight, Gavin found himself standing outside Alicia's apartment building, wondering if 18 years was too long to ask for forgiveness. The address had been easy enough to find. A modest complex in Coral Gables, the kind of place where working people lived quiet lives far from the glittering towers of downtown Miami. Her unit was on the 3rd floor, a corner apartment with a small balcony overlooking a courtyard. Light flickered behind thin curtains. She was awake. Gavin's finger hovered over the buzzer for Unit 3C. What was he supposed to say? Hi, I just discovered my family destroyed your life, and I had no idea. Sorry my father's greed forced you to abandon all your dreams. The words seemed pathetically inadequate. Before he could lose his nerve, the building's front door opened. Alicia stepped out wearing scrub pants and a faded t-shirt, a laundry basket balanced on her hip. She stopped when she saw him, but didn't look surprised. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. How did you know I'd come? Because you always were too curious for your own good. She set the basket down and leaned against the doorframe. And because guilt makes people do predictable things. Have you ever felt the weight of something that wasn't technically your fault but still felt like your responsibility? That burden of inherited shame that sits heavy in your chest? Comment below if you've carried someone else's sins. I talked to my father, and he told me enough. Alicia's laugh held no humor. I doubt that. Your father never told the whole truth about anything if he could help it. The night Air carried the scent of jasmine from the courtyard garden. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed through the Miami streets. Normal sounds of a city that never quite slept. But standing here with her, Gavin felt like they existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me what really happened." She studied his face in the amber glow of the parking lot lights. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded toward the courtyard. "We can't do this in the hallway." They found a bench near a small fountain, far enough from the building that their voices wouldn't carry to sleeping neighbors. Alicia tucked her legs under her, the same way she used to sit when they talked through problems as kids. "Your father didn't just buy our neighborhood," she began. "He systematically destroyed it first." The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. Stories of mysterious code violations that appeared overnight. Water and electricity shutoffs blamed on outdated infrastructure. Small businesses that suddenly couldn't get permits renewed. Families who found themselves facing tax assessments they couldn't afford. Do you believe some people are born predators? Or do you think power corrupts even good people? What would you do if you discovered your family's wealth came from destroying others? Share your thoughts below. My mom tried to organize resistance. She thought if enough families stood together, they could fight back. Alicia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That's when things got personal. Personal how? Late-night phone calls with no one on the line. Dead rats left on our doorstep. Sugar in our car's gas tank. Her fingers traced patterns on the bench between them. Then someone threw a brick through our window with a message tied to it. Gavin's throat felt like sandpaper. What did it say? Take the money and leave, or lose more than your house. The fountain bubbled quietly beside them, a peaceful sound that felt obscene given the violence of her words. That's when Mom decided we had to go. She was scared they'd hurt me or my little brother. Alicia looked up at him finally, and in her eyes, he saw an echo of the frightened girl she'd been. We left that night with whatever we could fit in the car. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call? Her smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. And say what? That your family was destroying mine? That the boy I loved was part of the machine grinding us into dust? Have you ever kissed someone knowing it might be the last time, only to discover 18 years later that they never forgot the taste of your goodbye? The silence stretched between them on that courtyard bench, heavy with 18 years of unspoken pain. Gavin wanted to reach for her, to close the distance that felt both infinite and non-existent. But every instinct told him he'd lost the right to touch her the night his family drove her away. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to you, Alicia, I had no idea what he was doing." "I know." Her voice was soft, but not forgiving. "You were 17, focused on college applications and football practice. Why would you notice entire families disappearing from your neighborhood?" The words stung because they were true. He'd been living in his privileged bubble while her world crumbled around her. "But you knew, didn't you? That last night?" She nodded slowly. "Mom told me that afternoon. Said we were leaving before dawn, that I couldn't tell anyone where we were going, that it wasn't safe. So you came to say goodbye. I came to memorize you." The honesty in those 4 words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered that night now with cruel clarity. How she'd kissed him with desperate intensity, like she was trying to save the moment forever. How she'd traced his face with her fingertips in the dark, whispering promises they both thought they'd keep. Do you believe some people are meant to find each other no matter how much time passes? That certain connections survive any distance, any betrayal? Or do you think some damage can never be repaired? Tell me in the comments what you think about second chances. "I waited for you," he said, "after you left. I drove to Atlanta 3 times looking for you." "I know. Mom saw your car outside our apartment complex once. Why didn't you come down?" Alicia stood up abruptly, pacing to the fountain's edge. The water caught the moonlight, making her skin glow like the 18-year-old girl he'd lost. "Because I was pregnant." The world stopped. Gavin's lungs forgot how to work. His heart forgot how to beat. The bench beneath him might as well have been quicksand for how solid it suddenly felt. "What?" "I found out 2 weeks after we got to Atlanta." Her voice was steady, clinical, like she was discussing someone else's life. "Mom wanted me to call you. Said you had a right to know. But you didn't." She turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was so raw it made him physically ache. How could I? Your family had just destroyed our lives, forced us to run in the middle of the night like criminals. And I was supposed to call and tell you I was carrying your baby. Have you ever made a decision that haunted you for years afterward? A choice that seemed right in the moment, but carved out pieces of your soul? Share below if you've carried that kind of regret. What happened? His voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the fountain. I lost a baby at 12 weeks. The simple statement landed like a punch to his chest. All the air left his lungs in a rush. Alicia, the stress, probably, or maybe just bad luck. The doctor said these things happen. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of protection he recognized from their childhood. But I always wondered if it was because of what your family did, if the fear and worry and constant moving caused it. Gavin stood on unsteady legs, crossing to where she stood by the fountain, close enough to see the tears she was fighting, close enough to smell that familiar shampoo that had haunted his dreams. I am sorry. God, Alicia, I'm so sorry. Are you? Were you just sorry you got caught? The question stopped him cold. What do you mean? Your company, Reese Development. You're still doing it, aren't you? Still buying up neighborhoods, still displacing families who can't fight back. His silence was answer enough. That's why I'm here, Gavin. Not for some romantic reunion. Not to relive our teenage love story. Her voice turned hard, professional. I'm here because your company is about to do to another community what your father did to mine. And this time, I'm old enough to fight back. The kiss, when it came, surprised them both. He reached for her face. She leaned into his touch, and suddenly 18 years collapsed into nothing. Her lips tasted like coffee and regret, like promises and pain. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. This doesn't change anything, she whispered against his mouth. It changes everything. Some mistakes feel like destiny. But when Gavin woke up alone in his penthouse, he realized the woman who'd shared his bed had also stolen his company's most sensitive files. The sheets still smelled like her perfume, vanilla and jasmine, the same combination she'd worn as a teenager. But the space beside him was cold, empty except for a single piece of hotel stationery folded on her pillow. Thank you for finally telling me the truth. Now it's my turn. Ugh. Gavin's phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from Marcus, his head of security. Then another buzz. A text message from an unknown number. Check your email. We need to talk. Channel 7 News. His stomach dropped. The laptop was already open on his nightstand. He'd brought it to bed last night, intending to review contracts after Alicia left. Except she hadn't left. She'd stayed, and they'd talked until dawn about everything except the business documents he'd carelessly left accessible. 27 new emails. The subject lines made his blood run cold. Questions about Riverside Development Project, community displacement allegations, request for statement on historical practices. Have you ever trusted someone with your heart, only to discover they were playing a completely different game? That moment when pillow talk becomes front page news? Comment below if someone's ever used your vulnerability against you. The phone rang. Marcus, boss, we've got a problem. Someone leaked the Riverside files to half the news outlets in South Florida. What files? Internal memos from 2003. Your father's correspondence with city officials. Payment records to private investigators hired to dig up dirt on community organizers. Gavin closed his eyes. He could see Alicia moving through his apartment last night, using the bathroom, getting water from the kitchen. His laptop had been right here, password protected, but not logged out. How bad is it? Career-ending bad. There's documentation of bribery, harassment, intimidation tactics. Your father kept records of everything. Of course he did. Richard Reese had always been meticulous about documentation, believing that knowledge was power and power required proof. The Martinez family is mentioned specifically, Marcus continued. There's a memo about making an example of them to discourage other holdouts. The words hit like physical blows. His father hadn't just displaced Alicia's family. He deliberately targeted them as a warning to others. Do you think love and justice can coexist? Can you forgive someone for their family's sins while still holding them accountable? Share your thoughts below about whether the past should determine the present. Another call came through. His lawyer, then his publicist, then the mayor's office. By noon, Gavin's carefully constructed empire was under siege. News vans lined the street outside Reese Corporate Tower. Protesters gathered in the lobby carrying signs that read, "Justice for Riverside," and "Remember the displaced." And somewhere in the crowd, he knew Alicia was watching. The girl who'd kissed him like she meant it had just declared war on everything he'd built. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from a real number. "I told you some secrets don't stay buried forever. Meet me tonight if you want to discuss terms." Same coffee shop, 8 p.m. Gavin stared at the message until the words blurred. She'd used him, seduced him, stolen 18 years of buried evidence, and handed it to the media like a gift. But the taste of her kiss still lingered on his lips, and despite everything, all he wanted was to see her again. Have you ever sat across from someone you love and negotiated the destruction of your own life, all while wanting to kiss them senseless? The coffee shop felt different at night. Dimmer lighting, quieter conversations, the kind of intimate atmosphere that made secrets feel safer. But nothing about this meeting was safe. Alicia was already waiting, same corner booth, but tonight she wore a black dress that hugged her curves and made her look like the successful woman she should have been. The woman she would have been if his family hadn't destroyed her future. "You clean up nice for someone who just ruined my life," Gavin said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Your life isn't ruined, just exposed. Same thing in my business." She stirred cream into her coffee with deliberate precision. "Maybe you should have chosen a different business." The waitress appeared, but Gavin waved her away. He needed his hands free, needed to be ready to reach across the table, and... What? Shake her? Kiss here. He couldn't tell anymore. Do you think justice and revenge are the same thing? When someone hurts your family, is making them pay the same as making things right? Tell me in the comments where you draw that line. "So what happens now?" he asked. "You got your story out there. The whole city knows what my father did. What more do you want? Accountability. He's dead, Alicia. My father died 3 years ago. You can't hold a dead man accountable. But I can hold his son accountable for continuing his practices. That hit home. I never displaced families. I never harassed anyone. No, you just bought properties after other people did the dirty work. Kept your hands clean while profiting from their methods." She wasn't wrong. Gavin had spent 15 years building on his father's foundation without examining what that foundation was built on. He'd assumed the neighborhoods they developed were naturally declining, that families sold willingly, that progress was inevitable. He'd never asked the hard questions because he didn't want to hear the answers. "What do you want from me?" Alicia leaned forward, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her dark eyes. Close enough to remember how those eyes had looked at him last night when she whispered his name in the dark. Reparations, money, justice. Her voice took on an edge that reminded him of the debate team captain she'd been in high school. Full compensation for every family displaced by Riverside. Public acknowledgement of what your father did. And a commitment that Reese Development will never use those tactics again. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your legacy and doing what's right? Between family loyalty and moral courage? Share below about the hardest ethical choice you've ever faced. That's millions of dollars. Your company made hundreds of millions from Riverside. This is a fraction of what you owe. And if I refuse, then tomorrow's news cycle gets even more interesting. I have documentation of 3 other neighborhoods your company displaced using similar methods. Miami Gardens, Little Haiti, Overtown. The coffee in his mouth turned bitter. You've been planning this for years. 18 years. Everything last night was real. The admission came out quietly, almost vulnerable. That's the problem, Gavin. I came here for justice, but I never stopped loving the boy you used to be. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. And now I need to decide if that boy still exists somewhere inside the man who built an empire on other people's pain. Gavin reached across the table, covering her hand with his. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean into his touch either. "Help me," he said. "Help me make this right. It's not my job to fix you, Gavin. That's something you have to choose for yourself. She stood to leave, but this time he was ready for it. Alicia, wait. She paused, hand on her purse strap. Tomorrow morning. My office. Bring your documentation, bring your demands, bring whoever you need to make this official. His voice grew stronger with each word. If my family destroyed yours, then let's figure out how to build something better from the wreckage. For the first time since she'd walked back into his life, Alicia smiled. Not the sad, guarded expression he'd gotten used to, but the bright, challenging grin he remembered from their teenage debates. Now you're starting to sound like the boy I fell in love with. Some people say you can't go home again, but when Alicia walked into Gavin's boardroom, flanked by lawyers and community organizers, she wasn't looking for home. She was looking for justice. And maybe, just maybe, a second chance at forever. The mahogany conference table reflected morning sunlight, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Miami spread out below them like a promise, all glittering water and endless possibility. But the real view was across the table, where Alicia sat in a power suit that made her look every inch the lawyer she should have been. Gentlemen, ladies, she opened a leather portfolio with the same precision she'd once used to dissect Supreme Court cases in high school debate. Let's talk about the cost of justice. Gavin's corporate lawyer, Mitchell, shuffled through documents with obvious discomfort. Ms. Martinez, while we acknowledge certain irregularities in past development practices, irregularities? The voice came from Elena Vasquez, the community organizer sitting beside Alicia. You called destroying entire neighborhoods irregularities? But Alicia held up a hand, silencing the room with the same quiet authority Gavin remembered from their teenage years. When she had something to say, people listened. Let's be precise about what we're discussing, she said, laying out photographs on the polished table. Riverside, 2003. 47 families displaced. Average home value at time of for sale, $62,000. Current market value of that same land, $2.8 million per acre. The numbers hit like bullets. Clean, factual, devastating. Have you ever seen someone transform pain into power? Watch someone take the worst thing that ever happened to them and use it to fight for others? Comment below about someone who turned their trauma into strength. What exactly are you proposing? Gavin asked, though he already knew the answer would change everything. Full market rate compensation for displaced families, calculated at current property values. Establishment of a community development fund managed by neighborhood representatives. Informal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Mitchell nearly choked on his coffee. That's over $40 million. That's what justice costs. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Miami traffic. Gavin studied Alicia's face, looking for traces of the girl who used to sneak into his bedroom to argue about everything from movie plots to world hunger. She was still there, underneath the professional armor. Still passionate, still brilliant, still absolutely convinced she could change the world one argument at a time. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out a final document. We want Reese Development to partner with community organizations on all future projects. No more development without neighborhood input. No more displacement without replacement housing. No more profit without partnership. Do you believe people can really change? That someone who spent years taking can learn to give back? Or do you think leopards never change their spots? Share your thoughts below. You're asking us to completely restructure how we do business, Gavin said. I'm asking you to do business like you have a conscience. The words stung because they were true. For 15 years, he'd measured success in profit margins and square footage, never considering the human cost of corporate ambition. If we agree to this, Mitchell interjected, it sets a precedent that could expose us to litigation from every other development project. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to build your empire on other people's graves, Elena snapped. But Gavin was only looking at Alicia. She met his gaze steadily, and in her eyes he saw something that made his chest tight. Hope. Not just for justice, but for him. For the possibility that the boy she'd loved still existed somewhere underneath the corporate armor. I need 48 hours, he said finally. 24, Alicia countered. 36. Done. She stood to leave, her legal team gathering documents with professional efficiency. But as they reached the door, Gavin called her name. "This isn't just about money, is it?" She turned back, and for a moment the mask slipped. He saw the 18-year-old girl who'd lost everything, the woman who'd spent years rebuilding herself from nothing, the mother who'd grieved alone for a child he'd never known existed. "No," she said quietly. "It's about proving that some things matter more than profit, that some people are worth fighting for, even when they don't know how to fight for themselves." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Gavin alone with a choice that would define not just his company's future, but his own. Outside the windows, Miami glittered in the morning sun, a city built on dreams and ambition and the bones of whatever came before. Time to decide what kind of legacy he wanted to build on those bones. Have you ever signed papers that felt like signing your own death warrant, only to discover they were actually your release from prison? 36 hours later, Gavin sat in his office at 6 a.m., watching sunrise paint Miami in shades of gold and possibility. The contract lay open on his desk, 47 pages that would redistribute $40 million and restructure his entire company. His signature was the only thing missing. "You know, this is financial suicide," Mitchell had said the night before. "Your board will revolt. Your investors will flee. You'll be lucky to keep 10% of your current contracts. Maybe." But Gavin had spent 2 sleepless days reviewing every deal his company had made since his father's death. Every property acquisition, every development project, every family that had been relocated to make room for progress. The pattern was impossible to ignore once he started looking for it. His phone buzzed. A text from Alicia. "Courthouse steps, 9 a.m. Media will be there. Your choice how this story ends." He could see it now. News cameras rolling as she announced that Reese Development had rejected their terms. More protests, more investigations, more families stepping forward with stories of displacement and broken promises. Or he could walk down those courthouse steps beside her, announcing a new kind of development, the kind that built communities instead of destroying them. Do you think redemption is earned through action or intention? Can someone change their entire life's direction with a single decision? Tell me in the comments about the biggest risk you ever took to do the right thing. Gavin picked up his pen. The signature felt strange under his fingers, like he was signing someone else's name. The Gavin Reese who'd built this empire wouldn't recognize the man giving it away to make amends for crimes he'd never consciously committed. But maybe that was the point. His phone rang. His mother. "Gavin, honey, I saw the news." "What are you doing?" "The right thing, Mom. Finally. Your father built this company on other people's pain. I'm not going to keep building on that foundation." The silence stretched long enough for him to hear her breathing, to imagine her standing in the kitchen of the house where he'd grown up, surrounded by all the beautiful things that blood money had bought. "She really got to you, didn't she? That Martinez girl. She opened my eyes. And now you're willing to destroy everything your father worked for." Gavin looked out at the city skyline, all those gleaming towers that represented success by traditional measures. Wealth, power, influence. All the things his father had taught him to value above everything else. "Dad, work for profit, Mom. I want to work for something that matters." Have you ever disappointed someone you love in order to become someone you could respect? Made a choice that felt like betrayal, but was actually courage? Share below about standing up for your values. At 8:45 a.m., Gavin walked out of his building carrying the signed contract and a briefcase full of documentation. Alicia was waiting on the courthouse steps, surrounded by news cameras and community organizers and families whose faces he was just beginning to recognize. When she saw him approach, her professional mask slipped for just a moment. He saw surprise, relief, and something that looked like pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, stepping up to the microphone, "I'd like you to meet the new Gavin Reese, the one who believes communities should be built with people, not despite them." She held out her hand, not for the contract, but for him. Gavin took it, fingers interlacing with hers in front of rolling cameras and clicking shutters, and stepped into a future he couldn't have imagined 48 hours earlier. A future where love and justice weren't mutually exclusive, where the boy she'd fallen in love with 18 years ago finally became the man she'd always believed he could be. Have you ever tried to rebuild trust with someone while the whole world watches your every move? When your private pain becomes public redemption, and one wrong step could destroy everything you're fighting to save. 6 months after the courthouse steps, Gavin stood in what used to be the Riverside neighborhood, watching construction crews break ground on something Miami had never seen before. Affordable housing built by the same company that had once destroyed the community. Healing happening in real time. The community center goes there, Alicia said, pointing to a cleared lot where old Mrs. Patterson's house used to stand. Daycare on the first floor, job training upstairs, medical clinic in the back. She wore jeans and work boots today, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look exactly like the girl who used to plan their future on his bedroom floor. But the clipboard in her hands and the authority in her voice belonged to the woman she'd become through 18 years of surviving without him. In the memorial wall, Gavin asked, right here, she touched a section of existing brick wall, weathered and tagged with graffiti but still standing. Names of every family that was displaced, so people remember what was lost. The memorial had been her idea, and it was brilliant. Instead of erasing history, they were honoring it, acknowledging the cost of progress while building something better from the ruins. Do you think it's possible to heal wounds that deep? To build trust when someone's family destroyed your family? Comment below about the hardest forgiveness you've ever had to give. Alicia, his voice came out rougher than intended. Can we talk? Privately, she glanced around at the construction workers and community organizers bustling around them. We're talking. You know what I mean? For 6 months, they'd worked together almost daily, planning, negotiating, coordinating with contractors and city officials and community leaders. Professional partnership that felt more intimate than any relationship he'd ever had. But they hadn't been alone together since that night in his penthouse. Hadn't talked about anything that wasn't business-related. Hadn't touched except for handshakes in front of cameras. The careful distance was killing him. There's nothing to discuss that we can't say in front of everyone else, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Because I remember you saying some pretty private things that night. Heat flashed in her eyes. That was a mistake. Which part? Sleeping with me? Or telling me you still love the boy I used to be? The question hung between them like a challenge. Around them, hammers pounded and machinery rumbled, the sounds of rebuilding. But all Gavin could hear was his own heartbeat. Have you ever wanted something you knew was complicated? Someone who represented both your biggest mistake and your only chance at happiness? Share below about loving someone when logic says you shouldn't. You want to know what I think about when I'm lying in bed at night? He continued, stepping closer. I think about how you felt in my arms, how you whispered my name like a prayer, how for one night, we weren't the CEO and the activist. We were just Gavin and Alicia again. Stop. I think about the baby we lost, about what our lives might have looked like if my family hadn't destroyed everything, about whether we get a second chance, or if some things are just too broken to fix. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she didn't back away. You think sleeping together fixes 18 years of pain? No, but I think it means something that we still fit together like no time passed at all. The admission cost him, but it was worth it to see her defenses crack just a little. We have work to do, she said finally. We have a life to figure out. Not here, not now, then when, and where. Because I'm tired of pretending this is just business, Alicia. I'm tired of watching you leave every meeting without knowing if I'll see you again. She looked around at the construction site, at the tangible proof that they could build something beautiful from something broken. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible over the machinery. My apartment, 8 o'clock. But this doesn't change anything professional. Understood. She walked away without looking back, but Gavin caught the slight smile she tried to hide. Maybe some things were worth rebuilding after all. Some conversations can only happen in the dark, when the weight of history presses close and two people finally stop running from the truth about what they mean to each other. Alicia's apartment looked different at night. Candles flickered on the kitchen counter, casting warm shadows across walls covered with photographs. Community meetings, construction progress, families returning to rebuilt homes. A visual timeline of everything they'd accomplished together. "You've been documenting everything," Gavin said, studying a photo of the memorial wall dedication ceremony. "Someone needs to remember the good that came out of all this pain." She handed him a glass of wine, their fingers brushing in a contact that sent electricity up his arm. 6 months of careful professional distance had made every accidental touch feel like fire. "Is that what this is to you? Documentation? You mean us? I mean tonight. This conversation. Whatever happens next." Alicia curled up on the couch beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, far enough that touching her would require a deliberate choice. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've spent 18 years being angry at your family. 6 months working with you to fix what they broke. I'm not sure who I am when I'm not fighting something. Have you ever defined yourself by your struggles? Realize that without your pain, you're not sure who you'd be? Comment below about identity beyond survival. You're the woman who turned her trauma into justice, who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves, who saw potential for redemption in someone everyone else wrote off. Pretty words, true words." The wine was making her honest, or maybe it was just the lateness of the hour. "I used to have dreams about you. For years after we left Georgia. Dreams where you found me, where you chose me over your family's money. And now I dream about the baby we lost. Wonder if she would have had your eyes or my stubbornness. I always thought it was a girl. Probably wishful thinking." Alicia's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I used to imagine teaching her to debate like we used to do, showing her how to stand up for herself." The pain in her voice was raw, 18 years fresh despite the time that had passed. Gavin set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you went through that alone. You didn't know. I should have looked harder. Should have found you somehow. And then what? We were kids, Gavin. 18 years old with no money and a baby on the way. Your family would have disowned you. Maybe that would have been better." The words surprised them both with their honesty. "Do you think love is worth losing everything else? That some connections matter more than security or family approval? Tell me in the comments about the biggest sacrifice you'd make for love. Easy to say now that you're rich and successful. I was already in love with you then. Money didn't change that. Your father would have destroyed us both. He destroyed us anyway." Silence stretched between them, filled with 18 years of what-ifs and might-have-beens. "So what now?" she asked finally. "Now we stop living in the past and start building something new." He reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers the way he had on the courthouse steps. But this time there were no cameras, no crowds, no agenda except the need to touch her. "I want to try again," he said. "Not as the scared kids we were, but as the people we've become. I want to see if we can build something as strong as what we've built professionally. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know we tried." She was quiet for so long he thought she might refuse. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative and full of possibility. "No promises," she whispered against his lips. "No expectations. Just us. Just us." Have you ever tried to keep your personal life private while living under a microscope? When your love story becomes public property and everyone has an opinion about who you should forgive. The Miami Herald headline read, "Power couple or PR stunt?" Above it, a photo of Gavin and Alicia leaving a restaurant together, her hand in his, both of them laughing at something he'd just whispered in her ear. "I look happy," she said, staring at the newspaper spread across his kitchen island. "You were happy. I was. That's the problem." 3 months of careful dating had led to this. Their relationship exposed by paparazzi who'd been following the Riverside redemption story since the courthouse announcement. What started as professional collaboration had become Miami's most watched romance. "Does it bother you?" Gavin asked, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "The attention? It bothers me that people think they get a vote on whether our relationship is real." The comment section of every article was brutal. Half the readers called her a gold digger who'd manipulated him for money. The other half called him a privileged white man trying to buy forgiveness with a black woman's body. Both perspectives reduce their complicated history to simple, ugly stereotypes. The community center dedication is next week, Alicia said, changing the subject. Media will be there, and they're going to ask about us, about whether this is real or just good publicity for your company. Gavin set down his coffee mug harder than necessary. Let them ask. It's not that simple. If people think I compromised the community's interests for personal reasons, you mean if people think you fell in love with me? I mean if people think I sold out? The words hung between them like an accusation. In 3 months of rebuilding their relationship, this was the first time she'd voiced the fear that had been lurking underneath every sweet moment. Do you think people can separate personal feelings from professional responsibility? That love and business can coexist without corrupting each other? Share your thoughts below. Is that what you think? That you sold out? I think I'm in love with someone whose family destroyed mine. I think that's complicated in ways most people don't understand. And I think you're overthinking this. Am I? Because half the displaced families won't look me in the eye anymore. They think I got seduced by money and power. What do you think? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out his penthouse windows at the city they were both trying to heal. I think I love you, and I think that scares me more than anything your father ever did to my family. The honesty in her voice made his chest tight. 3 months of careful dating, of rebuilding trust one conversation at a time, and she still doubted whether loving him was a betrayal of everything she'd fought for. The community center dedication, he said finally. We go together, publicly. Let people see that justice and love aren't mutually exclusive. And if they don't believe us, then we keep proving them wrong, one day at a time. She leaned across the island and kissed him, coffee-flavored and full of determination. No backing out this time, she said against his lips. No running away. No more secrets. Just us. Finally. Sometimes the end of your story is really just the beginning. And when Alicia walked onto that dedication stage, she wasn't just cutting a ribbon. She was cutting the last chain that bound her to the past. The Riverside Community Center gleamed in afternoon sunlight, its brick facade etched with the names of every family that had been displaced 20 years earlier. Carmen Martinez was listed third from the top, bold letters that caught the light like a promise kept. 2 years ago, this was an empty lot, Alicia said into the microphone, her voice carrying across a crowd of hundreds. Before that, it was my childhood home, the place where my mother taught me that dignity matters more than money, that community matters more than profit. In the VIP section, Gavin watched her command the crowd with the same passion she'd brought to high school debates. But now her words carried the weight of experience, of battles fought and won. Today, we're not just opening a building. We're proving that healing is possible. That communities torn apart can be rebuilt stronger. That justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. The crowd erupted in applause. Families who'd lost everything 20 years ago stood beside families who'd moved into the new affordable housing. Children played in spaces where their grandparents' homes had once been demolished. But none of this would have been possible without partnership, without someone willing to admit their family's mistakes and commit to doing better. She looked directly at Gavin, no longer hiding their connection from cameras or critics. Have you ever seen someone transform pain into purpose? Watch someone take the worst thing that ever happened to them and use it to heal an entire community? Comment below about the strongest person you know. Gavin Reese could have fought our demands in court, could have let lawyers drag this out for years. Instead, he chose accountability. He chose partnership. He chose love over legacy. The last words were barely audible over the crowd's cheers, but Gavin heard them clearly. Watched her smile spread across her face as she looked at him. The Riverside Community Center is officially open. Red ribbon fell in 2 pieces as scissors flashed in the sunlight. But the real cutting had happened months ago when 2 people decided that some things were worth rebuilding, even if it meant starting from scratch, even if it meant forgiving the unforgivable, even if it meant believing that love could triumph over everything that tried to destroy it. Some love stories end with wedding bells. But the best ones end with two people who choose each other every day, building something bigger than either could create alone. 1 year later, Gavin stood in the same parking garage where he'd first seen Alicia again, but everything had changed. The space hummed with different energy now. Kids from the community center's after-school program, helping wash cars for their fundraiser, turning mundane work into celebration. You know what I love most about this? Alicia asked, appearing beside him with paint smudged on her cheek from the mural project upstairs. What? This used to be where you saw me as broken. Someone who'd fallen so low I was cleaning your car. She gestured toward the laughing children, the proud parents, the teenagers learning job skills that would change their futures. Now it's where we're building dreams. Gavin pulled her close, not caring who saw, not caring about cameras or critics or anyone's opinion about their unconventional love story. I never saw you as broken, he said. I saw you as the girl who got away, the one who made me want to be better than I was. And now I see you as the woman who came back to save me from becoming my father. Have you ever found your way back to someone who helped you become who you were meant to be? Someone who saw your potential when you couldn't see it yourself? Share your story in the comments below. She kissed him then, right there in the parking garage where their second chance had begun, surrounded by proof that some things are worth fighting for. That love and justice can coexist. That redemption is possible. That sometimes the person who breaks your heart is the only one who can heal it. So what's next? She asked against his lips. Everything, he said. Absolutely everything. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that prove love can conquer even the deepest wounds. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Gavin? Would you have fought for justice or chosen love? And remember, the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about broken people who choose to heal together.